Hello everyone, this is part 17 of What If Naruto Was Abused and Obtained Mokuton, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Onoki was beyond infuriated. He was livid and a little fearful. Not because of the Akatsuki but because of the current situation that was unfolding. It had to do with the criminal organization. But that was not the major threat. The organization weakened them. And he had foolishly dismissed them when Konoha came to give him a warning. No, that had been a reasonable decision then. After all, they were just a bunch of criminal elements who dared to threaten the balance of the great nations. He'd never thought they would have this much success. And even I had complained after they made an attempt on his only remaining Jinchuriki. He'd dismissed the Raikage even though he'd already lost one of his Jinchuriki. It would be humiliating to now go back to that man and say he too was worried or even start spilling the beans. No, there was nothing to spill. He knew nothing even though he'd hired those criminals. Tsunade had called in a cage summit and he'd been pondering on whether to honor it. Now he had no choice and those questions about his relationship with the organization would come. I never thought we would lose all our Jinchuriki, Kitsuki said, shaking his head while a serious look settled on his face. It's bad enough that the likes of Kumo and Konoha still maintain theirs. This was the frightening part. The Beiyu those two used were the most powerful and both have shown the ability to use the full power of those Beiyu. Onoki was deeply envious of Konoha. The village had the Sannin. They had the likes of Kakashi. And now, a powerful Uchiha and a Mokuton user who was a Jinchuriki. Those two were surely shinobi to be reckoned with. They had come to his village and he has seen the Uchiha's skill in the exam. And the blonde had also shown his might during the trials. Recent reports of the blonde have also shown a shinobi proficient with Mokuton and capable of fighting any battle. Awagakur was lagging behind. It could not be fine for the village to be on this side of things. And they all have control of the Beiyu, Kitsuki said in a stern tone. We have to retrieve those two. If they are still alive, they could be D. From the intel Konoha provided, that could be the case. Well, that presents a good opportunity, Kuretsuki said, grinning as she did. It does give us an opportunity to collect other Beiyu that the organization has collected. Surely, then, Iwa will become the most powerful with no other village to challenge it. Ideally, that was a good solution. But it did seem that Kuretsuki was forgetting that the Akatsuki had members who could defeat a Jinchuriki. They didn't need an army to do so. Roshi and Han were not weak shinobi. They were powerful, more so than the two standing in front of his desk. Logic dictated that retrieving those two wouldn't be a simple task. It will only lead to war if we go that far, Onoki stated firmly. When it could be avoided, it was best to do so. He didn't want to spend the rest of his life fighting a war. He had seen enough of that bath already. Which we would win. Think about the loss of life. Kitsuki shouted at Kuretsuki. Even if we won, it would come at a high cost. Everyone always loses something in war. If we can avoid it, we must do so. But it doesn't mean we must not take advantage of the situation if we can. Konoha is busy hunting the Akatsuki members. And no doubt, the Raikage will do so. We can look for the hideout of the Akatsuki while they are chasing the members. If we find the Beiyu, we take them all. But to avoid war, we offer to sell them back to their nations. It would only be reasonable for our efforts and the loss of life we would have faced. But we would be giving them power. And gain enough money. The likes of Suna wouldn't be able to afford the price. They can be indebted to us. It is all about strategically plotting out rather than making reckless decisions, Kuretsuki countered. And Konoha? Kitsuki asked. Onoki watched father and daughter argue for a moment before speaking. No doubt the Uchiha and the Uzumaki will be troubling in case something happens. They work as a pair, which makes them formidable. The Tsuchikage adopted a thoughtful look and then turned to Kitsuki. We cannot be seen to be going against the Leaf. Mercenaries then. Yes, let me think for now. We will decide which way to proceed. We can't forget that the Cage Summit will happen. If there was no summit, things would work out differently. We could go along with Kuretsuki's thought. It is what Konoha did before. But there is going to be a summit, and there will be an agreement on how to handle things. It isn't like we have always been bound by those agreements. Onoki stared at Kuretsuki and then shook his head. He taught her wrong. Konoha. Sakura didn't hide her happiness seeing a dear friend. If tears came easily, they'd be streaming down her cheeks as if fleeing from something. There was no better friend than Ino. No childhood friend she still had aside from this annoying person who made fun of her forehead whenever possible. She rushed to her, engulfing her in a tight hug. A warm smile on her face. Crushing me like that, Sasuke is going to think you're a man. Sakura quickly let go of Ino, while still smiling. You haven't changed. Neither have you. Ino pointed at Sakura's chest with a laugh. Don't start. Ino shrugged, and faced the streets. She had truly changed. She looked the part of kunoichi and seemed tired as well. She was one of best medical kunoichi. Ino sighed. What was she? Just tagging with Naruto, and dreaming to be in the intelligence, protecting Konoha using clan jutsu. They all had their strengths. Sakura's skills suited this kind of role. But there was no denying who was better. Then again, Sakura had always been smart. She just became dumb when thinking about her beloved Sasuke-kun. A lost cause that was. And Ino thought she was the only one in position to drive the message. It has been a while. So, tell me, what have you been busy with? I hear you've become quite the famous kunoichi. Sakura smiled. But still much to do. But at least, she did feel and look like part of Team 7. Those two were better than others. But she was going there. She could stand along them. She just needed to do a little more. I want to hear more about you and your travels with Naruto and Sasuke-kun. You know, I came back, and you weren't around. Gone for a mission. Don't you think there should be something to talk about? Ino folded her hands across her chest, staring. Nothing to tell. Sakura shrugged. So, nothing much to tell, Ino shrugged. They did training. I watched. Fooled around with Naruto. It can't be all. Curious about dear Sasuke. A little. Forget it. Sasuke doesn't even think about relationships. You must think about yourself. Life is not a fairy tale. You don't get to marry your childhood love. Sasuke doesn't even notice you. Never has. You think he is suddenly going to like you. Ino said those words on a harsh tone. Sakura felt like she had been stabbed through the heart. She did have those thoughts. But she always crushed them. As long as there was hope, she would hope. There was nothing wrong. She was still young. Marriage was still far. It is not as if I haven't thought about it. But when you have given your heart to something, it is difficult to change. So, you're not going to stop. I don't think I can stop loving him. Maybe you all see the cold-hearted person, but I see a precious person. Yeah. Naruto was saving your behind whole Sasuke ran to fight opponents, Ino snorted. I won't deny that, but he had his moments. And I don't think you love someone because of the things they give you. I think, a true testament to your love is when someone has put you through the worst, given you nothing but you always find room for them in your heart, even when it hurts. Some people call that an unhealthy obsession. Yeah, Sakura admitted. But I love Sasuke. And nothing will change that. I just don't know if I will move on from him. Just don't wait for him. Otherwise, you'll only have your career at the end. And misery of seeing him with someone else. Flashback. Sasuke watched the swirling vortex with keen eyes. This was a presence he didn't want, not at the moment. Naruto was right about caution. But if they kill this person, it would remove a lot of problems. Maybe he could take a chance. Naruto was way too cautious at times. Even he did admit as much. If the blonde wasn't making him wait, he wouldn't even have to deal with this man. Whatever you want to say to me, I'm not interested. People did tended to think he was easier to manipulate and without Naruto he'd be lost. It was ridiculous. His past attitude didn't help his image. Either way, he was neither simple nor gullible than anyone who whispered sweet things to his ears would win him over. Do not be hasty. I came all the way to talk to you. How did you even manage to track me down? You appear to always know where I am. And that bothered him. This was an enemy. He couldn't be free if the man was watching his every step. It would mean he was always a step ahead of him. He had to discuss the issues with Naruto. In Sage mode, Naruto had better senses. Their safety and privacy were of importance and couldn't be compromised or else they would fail. That is not important, Obito replied without emotion. His fellow Uchiha had grown mature and thinking with his mind and not his emotions. I cannot understand why you refuse to join me and still work with Naruto for Konoha. You already know what they ordered Itachi to do. Sasuke's expression became stern. He still had a little difficulty processing this treachery of the Uchiha. His feelings were not mixed. He was clear, but he understood the nature of things. He understood the bigger picture. His mother, his father, and his brother, forced to shoulder such a burden and guilt because someone deemed it necessary to wipe out his entire clan. And this man took part in it. The part that gave him relief was that he had butchered the man who gave the order. But the villagers still remained ungrateful to the sacrifice his brother made. But the same was for Naruto. He had to shoulder it. I have my reasons. And Naruto is my friend. I will never betray the only friend I have. Are you sure he is your friend? He could be simply playing a role given to him by the Sandaime. He could even be using Shisui's eye on you. Sasuke nearly scoffed. You do not understand Naruto or our relationship. You have no right to say anything. Don't say I didn't warn you. As a fellow Uchiha, I was giving you an opportunity to join me. You can always do so by capturing Naruto for me. That is never going to happen. Flashback end. Awagakur. Onoki swore as pain shot through his back. It was getting worse and worse. Could he even fight in this condition? Every time he stood up, it felt like there were thousands of liters he was pulling up. With his short stature, it shouldn't be difficult, and yet, he was struggling. Perhaps he needed to go for a physical examination. Either way, the curtains were closing. Maybe they had some time ago, and in his stubbornness, he was too blind to see it. He glanced at Kitsuki, the thoughts he held drumming on his forehead. He would have considered Kuretsuki as his successor. She was smarter than her father. Sit down, he said to his son. This was a conversation they'd never had before. Kitsuki was a trusted shinobi. An elite among elites. He'd never considered taking him out, but the village needed him to fill another role now. You understand our situation now, right? Regarding the loss of our Jinchuriki. Yes, Onoki said in hardened tone before taking a pause, hands on his desk. After that discussion about hunting down all Bayou to sell them, I've had time to consider things. At the Cage Summit, this issue will come up. The nations might make an agreement that each village should retain the Bayou they lost instead of starting a race. Why hadn't he considered this before? Nobody was really eager to start a war. They all knew the pain and suffering that came with war. It was a time of peace now. An agreement would be made to avoid a Bayou race. If there is a Bayou race, there will be war. Shinobi will betray each other for the power. It wouldn't matter if a Bayou once belonged to Iwa or Kumo. Whoever got it first would be the one to own it. War would break out. Destruction and death would doom them all. Onoki had seen enough of wars, but if it had to be done to protect the interests of Awagakur, then so be it. Will they honor it? You never know. That is why we cannot trust anyone. We will take responsibility for our Bayou, and anyone who gets in the way will face us. I'm more concerned about Konoha's growing power. The Sannin are past the prime years, but they are still powerful. And the current generation seem to have unassailable power. Kitsuki said in a worried tone. Onoki didn't want to think too deeply about it. But as long as Tsunade remained in charge, he didn't think any Bee wars would rise from the ashes. She was a student of the third, she was too nice. But to be worried was a natural reflex. For the moment, there is nothing we can do about it. They also have allies with Sunagakur. We just have to strengthen ourselves and maybe take the Seven Tails. It belongs to a small nation, none of the great nations will get involved. But they might do something. Yes, but we have to protect ourselves. We cannot sit still and hope no war will happen. This world was full of surprises. It took looking at someone in the wrong way to ignite the intense flames of war. Admittedly, the current generation was a lot more resilient. But Shinobi was still Shinobi. After the summit, I will name you as my successor. Kitsuki was silent for a couple of seconds. Why? I have to retire. I'm way too old and I'm afraid I cannot lead effectively if there is trouble ahead. I can only offer my wisdom. Kitsuki knew that already. But despite his old age, Onoki still commanded respect among the shinobi. But he was asking why he was being chosen. Why not Kuretsuki? She is young and still too reckless. You heard her when we spoke earlier. We doesn't think twice about acting in a way that would result in war. As long as it benefits Iwa, she will do anything. Onoki said in a hardened tone. That argument you had with her convinced me she is not yet ready to lead. You should take the blame for that. I should have taught her better. But like me, she is stubborn. The important thing is that she loves this village. But in this time, I need you to take charge of the village to steer it out of this situation. Kuretsuki needs to continue with her education. I understand. Good. Onoki forced his body to relax, relieving the tension. I have received word that Deidara has been killed by Konoha shinobi. We want to verify it, but it must be true. They have been hunting down Akatsuki members. It's not good news. At this rate, if he could be convinced to return, I would have permitted it. Deidara was skilled. Onoki sighed. He is D now. We have to do more to strengthen our shinobi. It is a pity you cannot will powerful shinobi. Sometimes, even with hard work, people reach their limits. Konohagakure. Sasuke stared at the large gates of the Hidden Leaf. He'd not expected to come here so soon. Even if he was to return, he'd thought he would drag his feet alone. But he was here with Naruto. A person who seemed to change his mind on whims. He was supposed to have come here alone, but the second they stepped out of the ship, he decided against it. There were grumbling thoughts within him. Treachery and sacrifice. And there was pain. The gut-wrenching pain and loneliness he experienced, while Konoha continued in peace paid by the B of his clan. Then again, if Naruto wanted to argue, he could say there is a village because his father stopped it. Maybe he was correct, but that wasn't the reality. This moment now was reality. Do we have to walk through the streets? He questioned, staring at Naruto through the corner of his eyes. You got a problem with it? Strangely, that response came in a flat plate. Usually, a smirk would be ushered the words. But there was none if it. For a moment, Sasuke felt the urge to walk in front of his friend, just to look at his expression. One would be mistaken to believe that Naruto was the one who was hesitant to step into the walls of the Hidden Leaf. We haven't been around in a while. There is bound to be some reaction to our presence. It will be good for you to judge from experience how these people think of you. You know, I've never cared much about what they think. Well, they change every day, but that is life. Civilians are easily swayed by actions and words. It is how politicians easily fool them with propaganda and unattainable dreams. Sasuke stopped walking and stared at Naruto. The blonde noticed but didn't stop. He just turned his head to face him. It was then that Sasuke saw that blank expression. It wasn't often you saw that. He shook his head. No, lately, he's seen it often. When Ino was around, the smile and mischievous grin settled, but it wasn't frequent as when they were still just genin. Are you okay? Sasuke felt strange just asking that. Even the words departed from his lips in a limp. It was worsened by Naruto's reaction. How observant of you. It isn't hard to do. Naruto looked ahead toward the gates. Hands folded behind. He was starting to dislike his current self. Deep thoughts turned him into a serious person. He was less happy than he once was. Sure, he fooled around with Ino, but when she wasn't around, he just turned into a walking D. He'd lost his spark. It wasn't that he was older. Maybe it influenced a little, but he just spent too much time thinking and plotting that he became a little too serious. What happened to that careless attitude he once possessed? He heaved a heavy sigh. It is just a mild personal intervention that has caused a debate. By now, Sasuke was already level with Naruto. I said personal. I hope there is nothing that is going to keep you from the important things. Naruto glanced at Sasuke for a second but didn't say anything as the guards came up. The usual checkup and then they were through the gates, back home. The home that birthed him, corrupted, and tortured them with loneliness. Sometimes expectations on shinobi were unreasonable. Then again, there was sometimes nothing logical about loyalty. Naruto didn't harbor that sense of loyalty toward the leaf. He didn't feel he was loyal to anything but himself. He was here because he chose to. And if he wanted, that could change. Nothing, but there might be changes. I wasn't thinking deeply about Konoha. Naruto finally replied. The streets welcomed them. Naruto wasn't surprised. He was more shocked that Tsunade hadn't sent her Anbu to drag them to her office. After all, they'd left and never returned since. There was nothing exchanged through this time. She was going to be pissed off. Maybe throw a fit. Perhaps seeing it would amuse him. This feels like a parade. With a smile, Naruto replied. This is a parade, he said. Isn't this great though? You have no enemies. And things appear well for the village. Our standing is good. Is it really? I think you're fake smiling. Ha ha ha, Naruto chuckled lightly. Some part of me had wished this happened when I was younger. I had sought for nothing than to become noticed. But when Orochimaru came, I didn't want that anymore. It is life. A part of me is a little happy. The devil in me reminds me that they act as if they didn't spit on the ground I once walked on. Which makes me wonder why you're taking this in. I could frown and remind them they hated me. He paused. Well, I will eventually do that. I will remind these people of the things they did to me. I don't think I can move on and be at peace if I don't confront that part. We simply cannot just smile and wave as if nothing happened. If I had done something, then yes. But I was innocent. How are you going to confront them? We'll see. For now, it is better to deal with things. I told you, I don't want to be miserable. Contempt won't do anything for me. But it doesn't mean we must be too kind. Let them be happy. One day, I will stop smiling and they will ask why. Sasuke shook his head. Naruto wasn't a good person. He just wanted to drum them up. Let them rejoice at the prospect of a powerful shinobi who would protect them. Once they have fully accepted him, fully trusting him, he would show them their wrongs. I don't want any part in that. You were not invited. Naruto shrugged. This is a little exciting nonetheless. If it weren't for the bittersweet taste left in my heart, I would be dancing right now. Nothing stopping you from doing that. In fact, I'm more surprised you're not grinning wickedly while waving. I'm not that superficial. Yeah, Sasuke replied with mild sarcasm. You should be worried about what the Godime is going to say to you. She isn't going to say anything to you. Naruto shrugged. I always have an answer. You struggle with handling people. Meanwhile, an Anbu dropped in front Tsunade's desk. What? Naruto and Sasuke are just outside the village. They should be walking past the gates any second now. I see. Leave them be. Hi. When the Anbu disappeared, Tsunade wanted to smash her desk. The paperwork would be spread all over. She held herself. Finally, the damn brats decided to return. No, they were not brats but grown shinobi who held no respect for her as a cage. Their contempt for her position was without question. Naruto had dropped Ino without even stepping into the village to say a damn word. Even if he'd not apologized, it wouldn't have been much of an insult as him just passing by. Controlling them was going to be the death of her. Good thing Kakashi was going to take over. He would deal with this mess. She could go back to drinking and being merry. Even gambling without care would do for her. It took several minutes, but they finally arrived. Throwing a chair wouldn't do. The Uchiha was expressionless, but nothing surprising. Naruto's imposing presence stood out. She couldn't imagine what it was like for those who faced him in battle. Hokage-sama. It was Naruto who greeted, a small bow of his head. Tsunade scoffed. She thought he was mocking her for a second but quickly buried the thought. I'm surprised you know I am the Hokage, she said in a cold tone. Before we left, plans were already in motion to make you Hokage. And yet there was no recognition from the two of you. It was frightening that Tsunade wasn't shouting. He would have expected a glare, intent and mountains of frustrations being hurled toward them. But the Godime was calm. No, she was going to explode soon. It was in her nature. Naruto didn't think Tsunade was capable of reacting like a normal person. Especially in this situation. Maybe the question was simply how long she would be able to contain her obvious anger toward them. I didn't think that was necessary. Unnecessary. She paused and then shouted, forcefully banging her desk with so much force that the paperwork was sent flying to the sides. You two left the village without telling me anything. Even after you left, you made no attempt to write even with the threat of the Akatsuki and you dare tell me that it was not necessary. While Sasuke did not have any outward reaction, Naruto raised an eyebrow, feigning surprise. I had permission to leave the village. I discussed this with Shikaku-san and the Sandaime. Sasuke was also included in the deal I made. I know this much, Shikaku told me. What I am angry about it is your lack of communication. You were intentionally staying away and not saying a word. You can't tell me you had no way of communicating when Ino was sending letters to her father. There was indeed a conscious decision to stay away from Konoha. And, if we apologize for it, we'd be mocking you. We made the decision not to say anything because personal reasons. Sasuke asked with a raised brow. Was there even a decision made? You throwing me under the bus like that? I'm just saying. We didn't make any decision. If there was a decision, you made it. I don't care for this. Tsunade snapped. She was sure it had something to do with the Uchiha, the personal reasons of course. There was a reason these two decided to K Danzo. Homura and Koharu wouldn't say anything. The Sandaime was D. Shikaku had an idea, but the only people who could confirm it were these two. And K Danzo. She glared at Naruto. Sasuke wouldn't have done it without Naruto. He was the fault for all these. But so was the Uchiha. I had to K him. It was Sasuke who replied. At any case, what has happened, happened. We are back in the village. And I must state why I decided not to say anything. Naruto said in a serious tone. Tsunade-sama, we are shinobi of the Hidden Leaf. If we exchanged letters with you, you'd have made some instructions. When we departed, you'd yet to become Hokage. So, there was no instruction we disobeyed. To disobey your cage is a serious offense. We didn't want to create that situation. We are conscious you are the leader. And we respect that. I believe we cannot be trusted to carry out anything in the village if you cannot trust us to obey you. I took a decision I thought was best for both us and you. So, I should be happy. Tsunade shot a sharp glare. Naruto shook his head. I'm not saying this. You're inled to take any decision you want. I just explained why we did what we did. It is up to you whether you accept this reason or not. Naruto was basically saying as long as he was a shinobi of this village, he was bound to obey her. And yet, he was capable of disobeying. She could only infer this much from what he was saying. She let out a frustrated sigh. We will discuss this some other day. There are more important issues to deal with at the moment. Sasuke gave a slight nod of his head. We have K every known member of the Akatsuki. But the leaders remain. Only 2 Jinchuriki remain. At this rate, they could be going after Kumo Jinchuriki. It was good that they had done this much, but at the same time, it was dangerous. And now it was apparent why they had returned. So you came back for protection. Naruto barked in cold laughter. Who in this village is stronger than me that they can protect me? Tsunade felt insulted, but she ignored this. What do you know about the Akatsuki? We do not know the goal. But we know the leaders or leader. One of them is an Uchiha and the other is a Rinnegan wielder who now controls the rain. Sasuke explained. The Uchiha who leads the organization claims to be Madara. Naruto added. Tsunade's thoughts came an abrupt halt. She was speeding so much she felt disoriented by the brakes. Uchiha Hell Madara. That couldn't be possible. The infamous man was D. If he was alive, who could face him in battle? These two were powerful but not in the same breath as her grandfather. You don't have to be worried, Naruto said, see Tsunade off from her thoughts. He isn't Madara but someone pretending to be Madara. He is an Uchiha. We do not know who as he wears a mask, but he is responsible for the Kyuubi breaking free from my mother's seal and manipulating the Yondaime Mizukage. That is still troubling. Konoha could be blamed for this. That would be stupid. There are more important things. The reason they are collecting the Beiyu. Yes. Naruto nodded. According to the Kyuubi, if the Akatsuki collects all 9 Beiyu, they will give birth to a monster that not even its power can be compared. I must state that in its full power, the Kyuubi claims it can fight all other 8 and still win. Tsunade stared at Naruto skeptically. He was now receiving information from the Beiyu sealed within him. Only a Jinchuriki could tell that a Beiyu wasn't a mindless beast. No, every shinobi had to know this much. It was just that shinobi craved their power and dismissed their intellect, instead turning them into mindless beasts whose powers could be harnessed. And we can trust this information. Naruto smiled. Yes, you have my word that the information is true. That makes things a lot more dreadful than we'd hoped. Dealing with a single Beiyu is already a problem. If the Akatsuki were to retain that power, it would be disastrous for the shinobi world. Tsunade stared. You cannot leave Konoha at the moment. I'd prefer to have you locked somewhere unknown. Why? To remove the risk of you falling into the wrong hands. If you are captured, it is over. You do realize that the Akatsuki could come to this village and destroy it just to get me. That is a possibility. I will not argue then. I wasn't going to hear any arguments. There is a cage summit that I have called because of this. We will discuss the next steps with other cage. Tsunade said in a hardened tone. In the meantime, keep a low profile. Of course. Is there anything else I should know? Not that I can think of. Now let us talk about Azu. Karen has already gone back. And we want to know what this is about. Azu is the home of the Uzumaki. My mother came from there. So, I don't understand if there is any problem. The way Naruto seemed confused by the question made Tsunade want to smack him. If other villagers find out about this, it will cause a problem. Azu was destroyed, and if you're attached to it, you may have enemies. If there are enemies, I will trample on them. In fact, it would give me an excuse to turn any village that dares into ruins as Azu is today. Those cold-hearted words made Tsunade flinch. Karen had already revealed to them that Naruto had jutsu to destroy a village as big as Konoha. She had wondered why he would create such a jutsu. His response now answered the question. You would destroy even innocent people. You should have asked the same question to the people who destroyed my home. Worse, there had been no threat. I don't hold grudges over it. It is the past. But history will not repeat itself. Tsunade wished she hadn't asked the question. Anything else? Sasuke wants to become Hokage. Tsunade turned to the Uchiha and then burst out in laughter. It took a minute for her to calm down while both Naruto and Sasuke just stared at her. Really? She asked the Uchiha. Yes. A Hokage will always select a successor. At this moment, I wouldn't select any of you. That is understandable. Good. Tsunade said. You may leave the office. Sasuke, I will call for you. But I want a detailed report about what happened with the Akatsuki and your time away. I almost forgot about that. Naruto replied. I'll have a report ready by the end of the day. Tsunade let loose of a long breath after both Naruto and Sasuke left. It went better than expected. Just not the last part. At least Naruto didn't bring out the fact that Konoha didn't help Azu in its time of need. It didn't make the situation comfortable nonetheless. Come out, Jiraiya. The Sannin popped up in the office. You could have just showed up. I just wanted to observe. The Slug Princess gave the Sannin a stare. I'm going to have to bring Azu in the summit. Tsunade said in a hardened tone. They are going to find out. And if we tell them Konoha is involved, anybody will think twice. Not that it helped before. In any case, if Naruto is given the option to choose between Konoha and Azu, he will pick the latter. That would just lead to chaos. And an end to these peaceful times. Jiraiya didn't want it to end. But if others decided to act on their whims, there would be fights after the Akatsuki and Konoha would be dragged. Maybe now they would become focused on the Akatsuki and not Azu. We need go ask which jutsu it is that he can do. Label it. If others know of such, they'll just grow paranoid and try to K him. Both Naruto and Sasuke are already threatening enough. Jiraiya shook his head. This world was a disappointment. Power that could not be controlled would always be feared. If they could not claim it for themselves, they would destroy it. Obviously, if someone tried to attack Naruto or Sasuke, Konoha would have to act. It would be a confrontation and others might even just decide to step in. In this world, you could never truly say you had allies. A secret then. One that I hope never reaches the light. Tsunade said. What did you make of their revelations about the Akatsuki? We already had suspicion that the leader was located in the rain. I trust everything he said. But I must admit I was a little surprised when he said Sasuke wants to be Hokage. I'm more concerned about his reasons. We will discover that soon enough. Omegacore. Nagato was a man dedicated to peace and nothing more. He was a man who would K anyone for his ideal world. Obito didn't think the man would ever betray him. Not since the man sought him out as he'd planned. But when he appeared in the tallest tower and stared at the cold eyes of Tendu, Obito questioned things. The look he received made him think twice. If you're here it means you were successful in capturing in the Hachibi. Normally, Obito was the first to speak but not this time. Only the Kyuubi remains. You must capture it. Nagato was silent. Finally, peace would be within reach. Only one remained. They had come a long way. Lost many comrades along the way. But finally, they would be within reach of the cherished dreams. Would stop crying. The shinobi world would know peace. What would Yahiko even say about the path they have chosen? Nagato shook his head. They had been naive and stupid then. Thinking about such moments would not accomplish anything. It will be done, he said in response. I suppose the Great Five will be taking action now. Nothing is being done as yet. But once the rakeage gets moving, they will be making movements. It will be already too late then. Nagato said firmly. Where is the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki? Either in Konoha or within the Fire Nation. Zetsu will provide you with the location. Obito said. He didn't think Nagato would lose in battle. But if Naruto went to Konoha, then things could be problematic. There was still Sasuke with the perfect Susanoo and even Jiraiya there. Two of the Sannin would be there. Nagato was powerful but they were close. Obito would not take any chances. I will separate Naruto from Sasuke. You can handle the Kyuubi, Obito said as he started to disappear. Konan stepped out of the shadows after Obito departed. What happens when he turns on us? She asked. They both knew there was something else that he wanted and was hiding from them. The Akatsuki Yahiko had found it but that man had hijacked it. We will deal with it, Nagato said confidently. Itachi had warned them that they were being used before dying. Maybe Nagato had been so lost in his hatred and pain that he didn't see anything before. He couldn't afford to be distracted nonetheless. He controlled the Gedo Mazo. He held the Rinnegan. He would see to it that his peace was finally achieved. Naruto's house. Ouch. Naruto held onto his gut after Ino punched him. Violence is no good, Ino. I'm going to have to report you to your father. This is being abusive. Ino placed both hands on her waist, stared at him. She had seen him take worse from Sasuke or his clones. She felt insulted over his acting that she wanted to S him across the face. If you keep playing like that, I'm going hit you with something hard. I still feel pain, you know. Really, I didn't think you do. Ino replied mildly. Then. What? Naruto's voice came sharply. It caught Ino off guard. It sounded like a rebuke. She wanted to huff but she stared at him for a moment. Despite his tone, he was still smiling. Can I come in? Apologize. Like hell. I can shut the door right now and go back to my studies. Ino didn't want to dare Naruto. He seemed to be in the mood today. She figured he'd S it shut in her face and then ignore her all day. Sorry for hitting you. Apology accepted. You shouldn't play like that. When I returned, everyone saw me. You know I returned. You can't always expect me to come running to you. Important, yes. But you're not the only thing that matters, Naruto said, stepping out of the way for Ino to enter the house. Those harsh words that brought a cruel reality. She would not always be first. Which girl wanted to be told that? She wanted to be told she would be first. Even if it were lies. What was so important that upon returning he decided to get down to it? What studies are you doing? She asked as he closed the door behind him, trying to shift away from the touchy subject. Reform and economics. I should have paid more attention and studied more as Sakura did, Naruto breathed, hands behind. He led Ino toward the back of the house. The door hung open. Papers spread around. It seemed like a child had been busy learning to write. Ino stared down at the papers, trying to make sense of them. She then glanced at Naruto. He was already on the floor, leaning against the wall, eyes on a scroll he had magically produced from thin air. She didn't shift anything but found some space to sit. She settled toward the edges, feet on the ground. Seems like some important stuff. Yeah, I was busy with it while away. There are some flaws I keep finding. Not good enough, it seems. According to her father, Naruto was going to be a great person. She didn't need to hear from him. Naruto was already great. But according to him, as he heard from Shikamaru's father, the Uzumaki was going to bring about an interesting change in the village. Highly influential. Your guest means I must leave. Ino nearly jumped hearing the stone-cold voice from behind. She immediately turned around to see who it was. A masked man. Konoha Anbu. What did Naruto have with Anbu of this village? I will visit once I am done. I suppose I will speak to Shikaku-san. And the Hokage. Naruto shrugged. Planning doesn't require her thoughts. It isn't like there is anything outward. Besides, I think based on my last conversation with him, he must have told her. But it isn't coming from you. That makes a difference. You should know it does. Naruto sighed. Fine. But I want to get things sorted with Shikaku before speaking to her. I will hear from you. The Anbu said. Will you or Sasuke be joining us? Naruto smiled. As surprising as it sounds, I'm likely to join than him. His role is a little different. Well, I have no problem moving at night, he said. For now, nobody is doing anything. I see. And just like that, the Anbu vanished into thin air. Ino had to admit, it was a little cool. She was still far in her training to that technique. But a walking matchstick like Naruto couldn't possibly be an Anbu. The moment you use Mokuton, everyone knows it's you. Wearing a mask would be useless. Ino said after the Anbu disappeared. She listens but doesn't quite follow. Naruto to himself, staring at the book he held. He then glanced at Ino for a second before adding. I wouldn't join Anbu. You should not. Ino said firmly. Who was that? Anbu commander. If it was someone else, Ino would have said a lie. But it was Naruto. He had been too friendly with the Sandaime Hokage. And he was talking about the Jonin commander. I don't want to know what you were discussing. Well, that's a first, Naruto smiled. But I wasn't going to tell you. You'd end up telling someone when bored. I can keep secrets. They would have kicked out at the training you're doing if you couldn't, Naruto replied. How is that going? Just fine. Team Asuma disbanded. I'm officially an Anbu trainee. I thought you were training under the intelligence division. Of Anbu, Ino frowned deeply. Someone changed things. That Manabiki even said I was not strong enough. I was sent back to do the normal training first. Then I would join them. I had been following my father then. Well, Daddy has to follow rules. No special treatment. If you had trained with us, you wouldn't be in such a starting. As if you had any interest in training me. You'll be surprised. Naruto placed the scroll on the floor. His brain was working overtime. It was no good. He needed rest. But since you're receiving that special training, I won't interfere. Besides, Anbu are the real shinobi. They train to see down people before the use of jutsu. You must understand the body structure and how to disable it swiftly. We are already going through it. Even seduction techniques. Even men under transformations are learning the techniques. Ino shook her head. I hope I am never in such missions. Sometimes to get information, you'll have to do that. It's not right. It's being a kunoichi. If you think it's not right, quit. Anbu have it worse and experience worse. For your sake, you must train harder. Unlike with Kakashi, Anbu prioritized missions. Most of them were covered anyway. Failure was usually not an option. I'm under house arrest, he suddenly said. What did you do? Akatsuki. There are only 2 Jinchuriki left. Protective measures. Ino stared at the floor. She honestly worried about Naruto. What if he got captured? And he was here plotting about things of the future and not the Akatsuki. It could all end if something happened to him. The threat was real. Others were getting captured. It could also happen to him. Are you going to be fine? Yes. For now, I just have to lay low. As far as everyone will be concerned, I'll be out of the village on a mission, Naruto said. He smiled warmly. But that just means more time to fool around. I wish. No. My schedule is hectic. Bummer. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment. Since you are here, let me tell you something. He paused, gathering his thoughts. There was a time I disappeared from the streets of Konoha for a couple of years and then came back. Yeah. Well, I was killed by Orochimaru. Took me to one of his labs and started experimenting on me. My healing powers made me the perfect guinea pig. It was a treacherous time. I suffered a lot. So many things happened. Some days I wanted to die. Some days the QB would induce me into giving to hatred. Let loose a couple of times. It is a dark past of mine that I struggle with. Ino stared at Naruto. Never had she thought he had experienced something like that. Orochimaru was a cruel bastard. Everyone knew that. But to think that Naruto was also his victim and this was kept from the village. Then again, the Sannin hadn't been liked. It would have just made his situation bleak. She smiled sadly. A survivor? Huh. Yes. I am survivor. Memorial stones, Konoha. So this is where you were when you were coming in late for team meetings, Sasuke said to Kakashi. The Jonin saw a forlorn figure as he stood motionless by the memorial stone. Everyone around the Jonin had died. His father committed suicide. His teammates died. And as Kakashi admitted, He K the other one. His sensei was also D. Everyone that had been close to him was D. But so was it in his case. Sasuke had learned that everyone has their own problems. The argument that someone's pain was greater was just nonsense. The world was a tragedy. And it spared no one. Kakashi glanced at Sasuke and I smiled. I was usually held up with other things. And you were just not being tardy. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Maybe it was strange. He wouldn't have thought of it much some time ago, but there was only one man he could call sensei, and that was Kakashi. The man had given him his all. Most of his lightning jutsu were variations learned after Kakashi's original move. Don't be like that. Sasuke shook his head. I want to speak to you about something. Kakashi glanced at the Uchiha for a second and then nodded. While there was mutual respect, Kakashi didn't have the kind of a relationship with Sasuke. Or maybe because he was just not the kind of person. With Naruto, it was different. The blonde knew how to make small talk. He was a social creature after all. I figured as much, he said. Follow me. He disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Sasuke followed in a buzz of lightning. They were within their former training ground. Team Kakashi was D. It was the normal cycle of teams. Soon enough, they'd have to take up their own teams. You have improved your technique. I didn't have a choice. Sasuke grunted. Naruto is deceptively fast. He also created a new technique that makes him even faster. I thought with speed, I would always be faster. Kakashi I smiled. It seemed that the campaign has not ended. It was just civil now. He was giving you a run. I was faster than him at one point. He sat down and developed a new technique. He said it was not right for me to be faster and still have the Sharingan with me. Kakashi chuckled lightly. Did you point out that it isn't right that he possess abnormal chakra levels and still is a Jinchuriki? Sasuke shook his head. He didn't want to think about that. It would just force him to go into training. He would never settle until he was able to put a foot on Naruto's throat. Your Kamui. I wanted to ask about it. Its nature and function at least. Sasuke said to his sensei. Kakashi raised an eyebrow. Why? I saw something that seemed similar and thought to check with yours. Sasuke said. It was impossible for two Mangekyo to possess the same unique ability like that one. At least as far as he was concerned. Can you use it for me? Kakashi was silent for a couple of moments before lifting his headband. His matured Sharingan shifted into the Mangekyo before he locked on a tree. It was wasteful to use his ability like this. But there was obviously something bothering Sasuke. And he decided to indulge his student. Sasuke had his Mangekyo Sharingan activated when Kakashi's jutsu was cast. It was the same swirl. The black vortex. The technique warped the part of the tree it was locked on. Everything was sucked into that void. He had seen this before when training. Kakashi always used it to suck things away from existence and they never returned. The only explanation was that they were being forcefully torn into another dimension. Whatever it was that the jutsu was locked on, it would take away. If it was his head, it would be ripped apart from his body. He needed to see more of that fake Madara's jutsu to form an idea. One glance wasn't enough. He needed to see more of its application. Anything more? Sasuke shook his head. You want to tell me what is happening? I will tell you once I have confirmed things. Sasuke replied. He glanced up for a moment. The Jonin was probably the only other person he could talk to aside from Naruto. I want to become Hokage, he announced without preamble. Kakashi was baffled. Not in a million years did he see this coming. Not even if he was induced in hallucinations, he didn't think his mind would form something like that. If Naruto said it, yes, but not Sasuke. Why? That felt like the natural response. Is that how you respond when your student tells you he wants to become Hokage? Kakashi blinked. You're serious? What in the shinobi world happened during the 2 years away? Sasuke nodded. You want to tell me why you want to become Hokage? It is the motive that matters, not the goal. Some people want to become Hokage for power. Some for other ideas. Nara compound. We're playing this game more frequently now, Shikamaru said, staring at the board of shogi. He enjoyed brain teasers. The strategic approach of the game kept his mind awake, especially when playing against his father. You don't enjoy spending time with your father. Mother would be happy. But, are you worried about something? Shikaku glanced at his son for a second and then back at the board. There were many worries a father had about his child. It was just a little better now that Shikamaru had grown. I heard that Team Asuma has been disbanded. Yeah. Ino has taken up another career path. Asuma-sensei has taken up another genin team. Shikamaru replied calmly. What of your path? Shikamaru inwardly groaned. He knew this was coming. He hadn't been doing much lately. He did missions in which the Godime specifically wanted his set of skills. Unlike other shinobi, he didn't have to bother about missions to make a living. He wasn't ashamed to admit such privileges of being born within a clan. And yet, he felt sorry for those who had no options but to take any mission available. Worse, if there was no mission and they had no savings, they'd have to go to the forest to hunt animals for food. The world wasn't kind, but nature was there to ensure nobody starved. I have yet to decide on anything. You're growing, and fast. You should have decided long ago. I hadn't thought our team would be disbanded. He blamed Ino. If not for her ambitions, they'd still have a team, even if Asuma was no longer with them. Jonin were only supposed to usher them until they'd grown strong enough to take missions themselves. Isn't it more like you were hoping the team would stay so that you didn't have to do anything? You must see the things happening in this village. It wasn't much happening, at least to the eye and to others. But the death of the Sandaime had left the village in a deep hole. Not to mention, there was the situation with Sunagaku. Danzo's schemes as well. It was all just too much that Shikamaru had thought it best if he just looked the side. He wasn't needed. There were people who were solving things. The only surprise was Naruto's involvement. Shikamaru had always thought Naruto as indifferent with no grand ambitions but just to live his eyes. He was wrong. You worked well with Naruto in solving things when it was needed. Shikaku smiled. It wasn't jealousy. His son was merely stating he wasn't needed. But Naruto wasn't going to take his job. Because he didn't like being restrained to and by anything. The blonde enjoyed his freedom. He was just glad that he was able to form a healthy relationship with the blonde, and he hoped the same would be with his son. Indeed. But Naruto isn't you. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow. He is smart. Yes. His mind is sharp but his greatest weapon is observation and understanding people. If you understand people, you understand the events that unfold around them. At least those were some of his words. If the blonde wanted to play politics, he'd play it well. On a strategic level, he is not you. And I don't think he will be around forever. Ino is going to be displeased. I'm sure she has dreams of growing old in this village. Shikamaru remarked. You want me to take over from you. I want you to be close to whoever is the Hokage. My position is another thing. You can be an advisor. Shikaku faced Shikamaru. I do not understand what motivates Naruto and yet I trust him. During the whole thing with Danzo, he showed he could be trusted. It is maybe correct to say I do not understand what motivates him. He used to do things as he liked. Shikamaru replied. I don't think even I can understand him. What makes you think that? He is complicated. Isn't that where you should come in? It's too much of a drag. If Naruto knows I want to understand him, he might show me something different, not because he doesn't want me to see but because it is amusing to watch me struggle, at least that was what he used to do when he was younger. He still did think the blonde was fundamentally the same. I have confidence in you. It isn't good to put much hopes in me. You don't want your mother to hear you say that. They both looked at each other and shared a laugh. Things are going to be different. Kakashi is going to become Hokage. With those two back and Sasuke making it known that he wants to become Hokage, there are bound to be things developing. Shikamaru stared. Sasuke wants to become Hokage. Yes, I'd be surprised if it was Naruto but I would still understand it, but Sasuke. People have ambitions. He may not be the best person, but there is no doubting his power. If Naruto supports this, it will happen. Why Naruto? Shikaku smiled. You'll find out eventually. I'm going to have a chat with him about a certain discussion we didn't finish back then. You should join us. I haven't seen him lately. I suppose it won't be bad. Mind if I join? Jiraiya asked Tsunade, who sat alone, drinking at a restaurant. She seemed as if she'd had quite a few already. The slug princess glanced at her friend and then back at her bottles. Can't sleep. It was late in the night. There is a lot going on that makes you think, Jiraiya poured himself a drink. He took a huge gulp and then continued speaking. Things are becoming more dangerous by the day and it makes you wonder if today will be the last day. Tsunade smiled sadly as she replied. My thoughts, she said. Don't you ever wish things had turned out differently? Sensei would have still been alive and Orochimaru might have become Hokage. The only reason their sensei didn't pick Orochimaru was because he'd come to discover the lust for power his beloved student held. Had Orochimaru been a different person, Minato wouldn't have become Hokage and maybe he would have still been alive. It was all just wishful thinking that clouded Jiraiya's mind and filled him with regrets. Sometimes, the Toad Sage replied with emotion. We are past our primes. So many have died. From those days, it is just the two of us who remain. Yeah, Tsunade replied with a sadness. She rested her head on the table, and glanced at Jiraiya. It's sad. I wonder what we did to remain alive while others have died. When I was still roaming around, there had been times I wished I was also depressed that much. We have lost everything. You have nothing. Not even a student. Don't you? Tsunade trailed off when an Anbu dropped in behind her and Wen whispered. A message from Kumogakure just arrived. The 8 Tails has been captured and the Raikage is demanding that the cage meet ahead of schedule. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.